and welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we share the journey of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners.
Hey guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories. Hope you're all well and keeping safe. As we cruise past the halfway mark of the year 2022, it is a happy coincidence that we are taking you to a place that happens to be almost at the center of India. To take you on this journey, our guide today is Amol Wanjari, who wears several hats, including being the co-founder of Orange Odyssey, a tour company specializing in heritage experiences around Nagpur. Let's hop onto the episode and find out more. So with that introduction, we'd love to welcome Amol Wanjari, an urban planner, practicing architect, educator, and co-founder of Orange Odyssey, a travel company that curates heritage and cultural experiences in and around Nagpur. Amol, thank you so much for being a part of the Musafir Stories and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure to be part of this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Amol, and it's lovely to have you and such a distinguished guest as well. Really eagerly looking forward to chatting with you. The introduction I gave was quite brief and concise, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about you, and especially, obviously, from a Musafir Stories perspective, our interest is going to be the part of your bio that says co-founder of Orange Odyssey. So tell us a little bit more about Orange Odyssey, what you folks do, and how long when did you start?
So we started with Orange Odyssey in 2018, but it was in 2013 when I was architecture student and me and Mandira, the co-founder, we used to be the representatives of our college. So we had organized a heritage walk for our colleges with a local body of architects. It was then when we were introduced to the heritage and the rich history of our city. Until that point of time, 20 years of my life, we used to be like, Nagpur mein kuch nahi hai. So that was even our first time to see the old city, and that was the moment for us. Nagpur mein ye sab hai, ye sab kuch hai. Right? The heritage of our city enthralled us so much. So we were full of pride and had developed a sense of belonging and pride for our city. So it was since then we were thinking we should show these things to other people who say Nagpur mein kuch nahi hai, Nagpur mein kya hai, right? So we started with taking walks free of charge initially, and then we went on establishing our venture, Orange Odyssey. So Orange Odyssey is a brainchild of my friend architect Mandira Nevre and me. And we have been doing these heritage walks for the past 3 years now. We'll be celebrating our 3rd anniversary this week.
Okay, yeah. Wonderful. That's great to hear. And we are delighted to have you on this occasion of your 3rd anniversary as well. And this also happens to be like a lot of us city dwellers tend to kind of think that way, right? That there's not too much to see around in our cities, but once you start digging in, there's so much more to uncover and unravel. So we are also eagerly looking forward to finding out more about Nagpur beyond, obviously Nagpur is famous for, I think it's two most famous, yeah, exactly, oranges. And obviously we keep hearing in the news that it is also the headquarters of RSS or Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. So beyond those, there's definitely a lot more things to Nagpur, and we are looking forward to finding out more about that. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be showing us around Nagpur and what we are going to be discussing today?
So today I'll be taking you on a heritage walk of the old city. The title of the walk that we do here in the old city is Nagpur's Story of Evolution. So we start this walk at Gond Darwaza and end at Shukravar Darwaza or the Gandhi Gate. So we call it a walk between the gates, and it's a 3-hour long walk where the theme of the walk is evolution. So we have divided the walk into 5 layers of the history. So we would be talking about the first layer, that is pre-Gond era, then about the Gond period, then the Ghostla period, and then the British period, followed by the post-independence period.
Okay, wonderful. So not just a walk between the gates, but also a walk between different eras and between different periods of time, right? Like you've beautifully put, right from the prehistoric periods to the post-independence period, right? So it's really a beautiful way of looking at a very layered history of Nagpur almost. So really excited to be discussing a little bit more about that. You mentioned that this walk is about 3 hours in duration. Given that it's a walking tour, in terms of distance, how much of a distance are we roughly covering in this 3 hour duration?
So it's nearly about 1.5 kilometers that we walk.
Okay, so that way it's not too much in terms of distance, and a lot of these places that we'll be covering are also close by to each other, which is great. Now, in terms of just kicking off the walk, please take it over and tell us more about where you start this, and let's start talking about this prehistoric period and its connection to Nagpur that you discussed.
So people usually say that Nagpur is 300 years old. The modern city, which was founded it was established by Gondolar, Bakbul and Shah. So that city is 300 years old. But this whole region was occupied by the humans prior to that. So in Nagpur, on the outskirts of Nagpur, we have these sites at Junapani and Mahurjari, which are stone circles. So those are the menhirs or the burial sites from the megalithic period. So there are 300 such stone circles at Junapani and Mahurjari combined, and those stone circles date back to 3,000 years ago. So that's a proof that there existed a human settlement in this region at that point of a time.
Yeah, I think it's also very peculiar, right? Because you don't usually come across these that easily, especially obviously the cities are so populated with buildings and everything now, so that way it's really fascinating to find these out. But in terms of you starting the walk itself, has it started from this point that you mentioned, Junapani and Mahurjari? Is it actually there, or you basically start with a reference to this?
We just
place?
Start with a reference to this,
okay,
and with another reference that is of Devri plate. So we have got a copper plate inscription at Devri, which mentions grant of some village to some person from district Nagapura Nandivardhan. So the copper plate inscription dates back to 10th century. And it is probably from the Rashtrakuta period. That is another proof that there existed settlement called Nagpur in this region. Now, the Nandivardhan, that another name that is mentioned with Nagpur, is today's Nagardhan, which is about 50 kilometers from Nagpur. And it used to be the capital of some branch of Vakatakas as well. So we are right now at the old core of the city. The old city is on the northern banks of River Nag. So we are right now standing at the Gond Darwaza, or the Nagarkhana of the Gond Palace. So this is about a 160 or 180 years old structure. In the end of 16th century, there was a king called Jatbasha Ajanbahu from Devgarh, and Nagpur region used to be the part of Devgarh kingdom. So during his time, there was a military outpost or a defense fort kind of a thing which he built at Nagpur. The fort was on the northern banks where we are right now standing, and it had 4 bastions, and it was a small fort. The region that we are talking right now is the central India between the Godavari and Narmada. So this region was always covered with dense forests, and these people from the Gond tribe, they used to live in those forests. So the region was called Gondwana region. So Gond as in the tribe, and Vana as in the forest in Sanskrit. Now, interestingly, our tectonic plate is also named as Gondwana plate. At this point of time, in the northern India, this Mughal Empire was at its peak. And this was Akbar's time, when this king of Devgarh was recognized as the local zamindar or the king, and he was given the rights to collect the taxes, and he used to pay the tribute to the Mughal Empire. During Shah Jahan's time, there was some king who didn't pay the tribute. So to collect the arrears, Shah Jahan ordered an attack on Devgarh. His minister came to Nagpur and he attacked on the fort, which was there at Nagpur. And in that attack, the 3 bastions out of the 4 got destroyed. So there is just 1 bastion which is left from the original fort.
And also just going back to this period, right? Like you mentioned, this was on the... Is this still the period before the city of Nagpur was established, or
Yes,
is it after that you
This
speak?
is the period Nagpur is yet to be established as a city.
Okay. Okay, please carry on. And you're taking us to the last remaining bastion
Yes.
that you said?
Yes. So now we are at the left bastion of the fort, which was here. So the bastion is around 25 feet high and it has a cannon on top of it. So the cannon is still there and it's called Mariam. So the gun still lies there. Now we'll come to the period of Aurangzeb. So during his time, there was a prince in the Gond family itself of Devgarh, and there was some accession issue. So to resolve the dispute, he sought help from Aurangzeb. While he sought help from Aurangzeb, Aurangzeb put an condition that he'll have to accept Islam. So this prince accepted his condition of accepting Islam as a religion. So the Gonds, who were earlier the tribal people, now were Islamic people. And the prince was renamed as Bakht Buland Shah, and he was given a title as Raja of Devgarh. This is the same Bakht Buland Shah who is known as the founder of modern city of Nagpur. So he had been to Delhi and he had seen the wealth and development of the Mughal empire and their cities. So he wanted to have similar things. So he came back to Devgarh and then he thought of developing his territories. So he chose Nagpur to develop on the similar lines. So he came to Nagpur and there used to be ancestral fort here at Nagpur, which was destroyed in previous attack. So he chose the similar site for building his palace. Prior to that, what he did was he joined the 12 villages in the region with the roads, and that is how the modern city of Nagpur it was established. So hence we recognize Bakht Buland Shah as the founder of Nagpur.
And this is believed to be in the around the year 1702,
Yes.
right? And also the belief is that it's named after the river Nag that you mentioned earlier. It's named after that, right?
Yeah, so there are various beliefs about the name of the city, but the most common one is that the city was named after the river Nag. River was called Nag because it flows in the serpentine pattern. So that is why the city was called Nagpur, a city on the banks of river Nag.
Right. And any other important structures from the Gond era that you cover off during the walk? This was the first one, was the
Bastion.
The bastion, right? Yeah.
So they shifted to Nagpur and they built a palace for themselves and a mosque for themselves because they were Muslims now. They used to follow Islam. So the first religious structure that came up in the modern city of Nagpur was a mosque. The mosque was called Shahi Masjid of the Royal Mosque. So it is the site of the mosque is just beside the bastion that we had visited. The older mosque is not there, but a newer mosque has been built on the same site. And the mosque used to be connected with the Gond Palace, which was built here. So now we'll move on to the next structure, that is the Gond Palace Precinct. So here in the Gond Palace Precinct, we have the plinths from the original palace, which used to be here. Older palace was divided into the two parts. One was obviously the public part, which had Darbar hall and everything. The other one was private part of the palace, which was their residential quarter.
Right.
The Darbar Hall is no more. But we do show the pictures from 1990s when the Darbar Hall used to be there. So there is just the plinth, and in front of Darbar Hall there used to be a beautiful marble fountain which was built. So the fountain is still there. And in the private part of the palace, the descendants of the Gonds, they still live there, and they have built their house on the same plinth from the older palace.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's old well which is there from that time,
Mm-hmm.
and which used to supply water to the palace and to the garden which was there.
Okay. And just before you move to the next structure, Amol, a couple of quick questions. So you mentioned that only a part of this remains, right? The palace.
Yeah.
And part is actually occupied by, I think it's a private residence of the family, right? So in terms of access, like how much of this is accessible that is a part of your walk?
Since it's a private property, we have to take permissions. So before going, we take permissions, and they let us see the palace remains from outside. They do not allow us inside their residences.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the king, Bakht Buland Shah, was succeeded by his son Chand Sultan, and it was during Chand Sultan's time that the development of the city took place. So he built a fortress to the city. So Nagpur was once a walled city, and it had 5 gates, and there were a few smaller gates on the river side as well. So there were 5 main gates of the city, out of which the Jumma Darwaza, where our walk will end, used to be the main gate of the city. So it's on the western side of the city. It was called Jumma Darwaza. And in front of Jumma Darwaza, there is a Jumma tank. So he built a lake for the water supply. And then he promoted agriculture and trade here. Now, after the death of Chand Sultan, there was again dispute in the family. So there was an illegitimate son of Bakht Buland Shah who came and killed the prince, and he took over the throne of Devgarh. So he started ruling from Devgarh again, and he captivated the 2 princes of Chand Sultan and his widow wife Rani Ratan Kaur. During this time, there's a place near Nagpur. It's called Yavatmar, and near Yavatmar there's this Bham where a Maratha Sardar, Raghuji Bhosle, he was establishing his kingdom and trying to expand the Maratha Empire. So this Rani Ratan Kaur, she invited Raghuji Bhosle to intervene. So this Raghuji Bhosle attacked on Devgarh, and he killed Wali Shah, the illegitimate son of Bakht Buland Shah, and he returned the Devgarh kingdom to the Gonds. Now, in the barter system, there took place an agreement of Devgarh, according to which this Rani Ratan Kaur gave 1/3 of her property to Raghuji Bhosle. That is how Raghuji Bhosle, a Maratha Sardar, came at Nagpur. Still, the kingdom was with the Gonds. So Akbar Shah and Burhan Shah, the Gonds, they were ruling. There was again dispute between the 2 brothers, and this Burhan Shah sought help from Raghuji. Akbar Shah went to Nizam and he was poisoned there. So Raghuji Bhosle intervened, and he got this Burhan Shah to Nagpur. He asked him to be at Nagpur, and he started giving him a pension of 3 lakhs. And he used to look after the administration. So that is how these Marathas, they got control over Nagpur very peacefully through agreements. There was no battle between the Gonds and the Bhosles. At the same time, there were 2 rulers who were staying in the same city. They were staying nearby. These Gond people, they were living in the Gond palace, the fort. So they were called Kile Wale Raja. And then there was this Maratha rulers who were staying at Nagpur at the same time. So Nagpur at that point of time was a great example of what we could call communal harmony.
Right. This is basically the same Raghuji Bhosle who perhaps started the Nagpurkar Bhosle family, right? That's part of the Maratha Confederacy
Yes.
eventually, and ruled several other parts of India as well. Correct,
Yes,
Amol?
yes. Right. From here on, we move on to our third layer, that is the Bhosle period. So, this Raghuji Bhosle was the third Sena Sahib Subha. Chhatrapati Shivaji, he had founded the Maratha Empire, and there were several kingdoms within the Maratha Empire, and there used to be one king, that is Chhatrapati. Chhatrapati Shivaji was succeeded by Sambhaji and Chhatrapati Shahu. So it was during Chhatrapati Shahu that there was a Maratha Sardar, Parsoji Bhosle, who had helped him. So Chhatrapati Shahu had given him the rights to collect the taxes from the Berar region, from the central India. And he had given him a unique title, which was called Sena Sahib Subha. They were still the Sardars or the ministers of the Chhatrapati family. Raghuji Bhosle was the third Sena Sahib Subha. He had come to Nagpur on the invitation of Rani Ratanpur, the Gond Queen.
Right.
And since they came to Nagpur, from here on, their family was known as Nagpurkar Bhosles.
Right.
This Raghuji Bhosle was one of the bravest among the entire Nagpurkar Bhosle family. He had participated in various battles and had done various campaigns. He eventually settled at Nagpur, and he was expanding the Maratha Empire on the eastern side. When this Nagpur kingdom was at its peak, it included most of today's Odisha, Chhattisgarh, most of the parts of Madhya Pradesh and Vidarbha and all this region. So this huge part was under Nagpur kingdom, and the capital used to be at Nagpur. Nagpurkar Bhosles had done over 8 campaigns on Bengal. So they used to attack on Bengal and capture some part and merge it into their territory. And that is how the Nagpur kingdom expanded till the Bay of Bengal. So when we say Maratha Empire was from Attock to Cuttack, so Attock as in Pakistan and Cuttack on the eastern end. So this expansion towards Cuttack was done by the Nagpurkar Bhosles.
Yeah, very interesting. I think even like you mentioned, the Maratha Empire expanded significantly during the reign of, or during the time of Raghuji Bhosle, and obviously even after that there was other rulers too that continued the expansion. But it's kind of good to understand how it's almost like Gonds went from being vassals of the Mughals, right, to slowly being part of the rule of the Marathas, and then obviously from Nagpur, how the Marathas expanded outwards more towards the east. So it gives a good sense of how Nagpur has also played a crucial part in that expansion, right? And in terms of the places of significance of this period, right? What are the places that you touched upon during the walk?
So we will now see the Nagarkhana of the Bhosle Palace. So it's called Kalyan Dwar now. So there's a huge gateway or the Nagarkhana of the palace which is remaining. There used to be a very huge Raj Mahal or the Rajwada of the Nagpurkar Bhosles. It had 5 courtyards and it was a 2-storied structure, and its plinth was in stone, and the whole superstructure was made using the wood. And the wood was extensively carved, and it had very beautiful and intricate carvings. So in 1867, there was a fire when this Rajwada got burned down. So nothing is left but just the gateway.
And in terms of say when you compare this to the Nagarkhana of I believe the previous one is the Gond period Nagarkhana that you touched upon, right?
Yeah.
Do you see in terms of say the size of it, or even any sort of differences or similarities? Do you see any, Amol?
So if we compare the two Nagarkhanas, the Nagarkhana of the Bhosle Palace is larger compared to the Gond Nagarkhana. And the Gond Nagarkhana is in sandstone, and the Bhosle Nagarkhana is in black basalt. So since it is in black basalt, it is still intact.
Okay, good to know. And this is the Kalyan Dwar that you said, right?
Yes.
That also has the Shiv temple inside.
Yes, and just beside the Nagarkhana, there used to be a horse stable, and the horse stable was eventually converted into a market. The market was circular in shape, so it is also known as Gol Bazaar. Now, this Gol Bazaar used to be the important plaza kind of a thing in the city. So there's a older talkies, one of the oldest talkies at Nagpur, Rajvilas talkies, which is just beside the market. The market used to be a vegetable market on Wednesday. Eventually, the market was moved to some other side because there was traffic congestion that was happening. Now there are smaller shops that operate from this Gol Bazaar.
So there's still a functional market, just not a vegetable market, right?
Yeah. It was during this Ghostla period that Nagpur saw a major development. So by the time of Raghuji II, the Nagpur kingdom was at peace. There were temples coming at Nagpur. There were gardens coming up at Nagpur. So Nagpur was also called as City of Gardens by some of the Britishers at that time who used to visit Nagpur. When I say gardens, so these gardens, most of them used to be the retreats, or they used to have some kind of temple attached to it. It was during his time only that he had brought orange saplings from Sialkot and from Aurangabad in Bihar, and he planted them all over Nagpur. So that is how orange production started here, and now here we are known as Orange City.
Yeah. So this is during the period of Raghuji II, you're saying,
Yes.
right? Okay, Raghuji Bhosle II.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that gives us a good insight into the origins of how Nagpur is currently is known as the Orange City of India, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for calling that out. And any other places of importance as well that you cover off as we are in the Maratha period?
So during the time of Raghuji II only, he built another palace. So the older palace was still there. He built another palace. It was called Navi Haveli, or it was called Bakabaita Vada. The Vada used to have a darbar hall, a residential part to it. There was a garden attached to the Vada, which was called Keri Bagh, the banana garden. And there used to be a temple complex beside the garden. So the temple complex is called Keri Bagh Temple Complex, which has 3 temples. So one is Lakshmi Narayan Mandir, one is Shiv Mandir, and the other one is Ganesh Mandir. The Darbar Hall, which was built as a part of the original Vada or the new Haveli, is now converted into a police station. And the building has a facade which is in sandstone. Probably the craftsmen came from Rajasthan, so there's a slight influence of Rajputana architecture as well on this building. There is a chhatri-like structure that we see. There are jharokha kind of thing.
That's interesting. And you said this is a police station as of today? Is that what you said?
Yes.
The Darbar Hall?
Yeah. So the Bakabai Savada is now converted into a school. So it's called D.D. Nagar Vidyalaya or Babasaheb Nagar Vidyalaya. Now, in 1818, there was a battle of Sitabardi which happened at Nagpur. And in the battle, the Nagpurkar Bhosles, they lost. So as an arrangement, they had to lose most of their territories from the kingdom. And Nagpur came under the suzerainty of the British government now. Now afterwards, in 1853, there was Raghuji III who was ruling, and after the death of Raghuji III in 1853, there was no legal heir. There was a policy of British government. The policy was called Doctrine of Lapse. If there is no heir to the ruler, the kingdom would be merged to the British Empire. So in 1854, there were orders of Doctrine of Lapse, and as a part of that, the Britishers, they took control over the treasury of Nagpur. They looted the older palace of the Bhosles. Then they took over the Bakabaitsa Vada. And when the Britishers took over the Vada, they converted it to a school. They converted this residential part into a school, and the school was called Neil City High School. He was one of the commissioners at that time. So it was named after him. And they converted the other part into the office of Kotwal, who used to look after the law and order. It was called Kotwali, and now the portion that functions as police station is today called Kotwali Police Station. So post-independence, the Kotwali was given to the police department.
Okay. And is it the Neil City High School that is today the DD Nagar Vidyalaya?
Yes. Post-independence, the school was taken over by Nagpur Shikshan Mandal, and a huge donation was made by Babasaheb Dhanwate. So the school was renamed after him. So the school is still functional and is one of the oldest functional school in Maharashtra. It has just completed 150 years. So the alumnus of this school was Dr. Hedgewar, the founder of RSS.
Later on went on to find RSS in 1925 when it is still headquartered in Nagpur, like I mentioned at the beginning. And also just before we kind of transition over to the next phase, which is the post-independence period, do you also want to highlight a little bit more on the features of the Vada architecture? Because this is basically unique to Maharashtra and the Maratha period. Right, Amol? Do you want to touch upon those, like how the architecture is? It's primarily, like a lot of it is wood-based, I think, right? From what I've seen at least. So do you want to highlight that?
The Vadas usually have the stone plinth, and they usually have a courtyard. So there's a courtyard which is open to sky, and around the courtyard there's a passage. Along the passage there are the rooms. So usually the Vadas have stone plinth, and the superstructure is usually in wood. The columns, beams, the floors, or the roof, those are in wood. And sometimes they also use bricks and mud for the walls. Here at DD Nagar, we can see a beautifully maintained courtyard which is still there with all the wooden columns that are there which have carvings.
Yeah, some very beautiful ones. And like I mentioned earlier, you will come across a lot of these Vadas across Maharashtra, right? Not just here, primarily even in Pune, where there was a lot of the initial structures from the Maratha period, especially during the Peshwas, as well as other places. But yeah, very peculiar and very unique to Maharashtra. So thank you for calling that out. In terms of the structures that we're covering off, or the places we're covering off during the walk, where do we move on from here?
So from here, we will move on to the site of the older palace. So the older palace that I mentioned, which got burned down, it is said that it was the most beautiful building, not just in the Nagpur kingdom, but in the entire Maratha Empire. Somewhere it is also mentioned that it used to be more beautiful than the Pune Shaniwar Vada. But after the fire, by this time the Britishers had taken over, right? There was municipal council which was already set up. So the municipal council, they raised up the plinth as well of the Vada. Like I mentioned, the Vadas used to have the plinth in stone. So in case of Shaniwar Vada, we see a plinth that is there. But in case of Nagpur, they raised up the plinth. So there is no proof that there existed any Vada or a building on that side. Yeah, that is the most saddest part. First the fire and then raising of the plinth. The site was then, the land was then used by the municipal council for a town hall, municipal town hall on the site, and some part of it they built a native library or Rashtriya Vachanalaya as it is called today.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are two buildings which are still there. From here we'll move on to the senior Ghostla Palace.
Okay.
This is on the same part of the land on which the original Vada used to be. So there is this senior Ghostla palace where the descendants of the Ghostlas, they still live here. So the palace is a two-storied building. Most of it is in stone, and there are two courtyards to the palace, and there's the third courtyard, which is their Devghar, and that is their temple of the Vada. So even this Vada, Rajvada, has a huge gateway, not as huge as Kalyandwa, but a huge Nagarkhana gateway.
Is there any significance to the name? It's called as the Senior Bhosla Palace, like you said, right? Is there any reason for that?
Yeah, so there was a partition in the family. So there were two clans, a senior Bhosla clan and a junior Bhosla clan. There's another palace in the same area, Mahal, junior Bhosla palace, which we do not cover usually in the walk. Now, even in case of senior Bhosla palace, since it is occupied by the family, we can just see the palace from outside and the structures that are there around the palace.
Okay, very interesting. But perhaps also one of the final structures of this era that you cover, the British period, is that it, or do we have more places to stop on?
So our next stop is Rukmini Temple Complex. Now this Rukmini Temple Complex is from the Bhosle period. So it was built by Raghuji III, dedicated to one of his mistresses, Rukmini, or Rukmini by Rukmabai. So it's a temple complex which has two temples, and it's I will call it as the masterpiece of the temple architecture by the Nagpurkar Bhosles.
Okay.
There are two temples. One is Shiv Temple and another one is Lakshmi Narayan Mandir. The temples of Nagpur usually have stone, Garbhagriha and Antarala, and the plinth of the Sabha Mandap is in stone, and the superstructure of the Sabha Mandap is generally in wood. So at Rukmini Temple Complex, both the temples have beautifully carved wooden columns and the beautiful arches in wood. Like I mentioned, the older palace which got burned down had beautiful intricate carvings. So we could see what could be the example of intricate carvings in these temples. Now the Garbhagriha which is there has tremendous amount of carvings on it. The temple is built in sandstone. For it's quite softer and carving is quite easier. Unlike the temples in Heartland, Maharashtra, Pune or other parts, this temple is not in black basalt but in sandstone.
Yeah, interesting. So one of the key examples of the temple architecture during the Bhosle period, you would say, right? So definitely important place to visit, and also, like you said, it's doubly important now because given that a lot of the architecture was kind of lost during that fire of the old palace, the old Bhosle palace. It's a good way to kind of sample some of that in the Rukmini Temple Complex.
Yes.
Where are we headed to next from here after visiting the Rukmini Temple Complex?
Now we'll talk some more about the British period. So when these Britishers took over the Nagpur kingdom and they lapsed the Nagpur kingdom, they made this part as a province of the British India. So the province was called Central Province because it was centrally located, and later on the Berar or the Varhad part was merged into the province. So now Nagpur city became the capital of Central Provinces and Berar state of the British India. These Britishers, when they came to Nagpur, they developed another kind of a city for themselves. On the other side of the Jumma Talab, they developed civil lines for themselves. So the story about how Britishers came and the civil lines we cover in another of our walk. It's called Dawn of British Raj in Nagpur. There are beautiful and grand colonial structures that are there at Nagpur. The best examples could be the Vidhan Bhavan, the General Post Office, or the old High Court, the new High Court, Institute of Science, the other places that we show during the other walk.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think it's also very a lot of other cities as well, you see this pattern, right? Once the British started, or the colonial period started, they developed separate quarters for themselves or for their like cantonments for their armies, etc. So you always have this pattern of civil lines propping up in cities that you can still find remnants of.
Yes, that is the pattern we could trace out in many other cities, that the Britishers have developed civil lines. So to divide the old city and the civil lines, there was a railway line which divided both the parts.
You actually reminds me, even in Bangalore, right? So I grew up in Bangalore. There is this huge park called the Cubbon Park that used to divide the old city and the Anglo-Indian or the British part of the city, right? That used to serve almost like a buffer. And at one point, I believe you had to even get passes if you wanted to move from one side to the other. So it's just interesting that you can actually see the subtle patterns across different cities within India developed during the time of the Britishers. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that too.
Yeah, these Britishers, they used to consider themselves as civilized and sophisticated people, and we were the unsophisticated ones. So they used to develop new posh localities, neighborhoods for themselves.
Yeah.
So we'll now move on to the final layer, that is the post-independence period.
Okay.
So after independence, Nagpur was still the capital of erstwhile Madhya Pradesh state. So there was reorganization of the states on the basis of languages in 1956, I guess. So when there was reorganization of the states on the basis of languages, it was proposed that Nagpur should join the new state which was going to be there, a Marathi speaking state, since the majority of the population was Marathi speaking. There was a Nagpur Pact which took place, and as per the Nagpur Pact, Nagpur would be the second capital of the new state Maharashtra, and it would have a bench of the High Court, and it would have a winter assembly session at Nagpur, because Nagpur was the only city which lost its capital status after the independence. So there is no other city which has lost its capital status. So since Nagpur was losing its capital status, there was this Nagpur Pact which took place, and as per the Nagpur Pact, winter session of the Assembly, Maharashtra State Assembly happens at Nagpur, because Nagpur already had infrastructure of an capital city which was developed by the Britishers.
Right.
So we have Vidhan Bhavan and we have High Court. So there's a bench of Bombay High Court at Nagpur which is still there.
Yeah, probably the reason it's also referred to as the winter capital of Maharashtra, right?
Yeah, a namesake thing.
Yeah.
Now we'll move on to the final stop, that is Shukravar Darwaza, or the Jumma Darwaza that I said. So during the Gond time, it was called Jumma Darwaza. When the Bhosles came, it was called Shukravar Darwaza, and post-independence, it is called Gandhi Gate. Similar thing happened with Jumma Talab. It was later on known as Shukravar Talab or Shukravar Tade, and then now it is called Gandhi Sagar. So yeah.
Yeah, interesting to see the changing names with changing times as well, right? But yeah, good connections there. And this is the final stop you mentioned, right? The Shukravar Darwaza or the Gandhi Gate?
Yes, this is the final stop, and we'll go to an old eatery here.
Okay.
We'll have the best Tari Poha in Nagpur in this one of the oldest food establishments.
Yeah, I think especially since you've been walking for the past 2.5 to 3 hours. Yeah, I'm sure one definitely deserves a quick bite of the I think it's very popular also in Nagpur, right? The Tari Poha.
Yes, so Tari Poha is very famous in Nagpur. So it's poha which is served with the chana and it's tari on top of it. It's very famous breakfast item here.
I think obviously all across Maharashtra there's a lot of variants of poha that's very popular, right? Try that out, and I think it's also a fitting end to the long walk that we did, covering so many different places and different eras even, right? Not just places, but you've very neatly stitched that with the different times that this belongs to, how things slowly transition from, we're talking the prehistoric times to period of the Gonds to the Marathas to the British period, and now finally the post-independence period. So it's all beautifully tied in together as well, and I think that's one of the key value propositions of great walks like this as well. Otherwise, if you're doing this independently, these would still be independent places without too much context tying them together. But doing it as a part of a holistic heritage walk like this, that and several other walks done by Orange Odyssey, it's great to kind of tie the different ends and make more sense of the long, rich history of this place, right, of Nagpur. So thanks so much for so beautifully tying all of these together. Just in terms of some of the other walks done by Orange Odyssey, do you want to touch upon some other examples too of the walks you do, Amol?
During the Ghostla period, they promoted textile weaving at Nagpur. So a lot of Koshti weavers and the Moomin weavers got settled at Nagpur. So Nagpur was once famous for its textile. So we have another walk which covers the stories of these weavers and this weaving culture. So it's called Weavers of Mominpura.
Mm-hmm.
Then another one is, like I said previously, Dawn of British Raj, where we cover the structures from the British period. During our British period walk, we also visit this Zero Milestone at Nagpur. There was this great trigonometric survey which was done to measure the distances between the cities. So to start the survey, this Zero Milestone was used as the benchmark point. Since Nagpur was located centrally, the city was chosen as the start point, and from here the survey was done. There's a pillar, a column which is there to commemorate this event. So when in Nagpur, do make sure to visit the Zero Milestone. Just beside the Zero Milestone, there is Central Museum of Nagpur. So you should make a visit to the Central Museum as well.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of interesting places to cover. Obviously, we only touched a fraction of it by doing that walk about the evolution of Nagpur. A few other important places that I came across while reading up was obviously this place called as the Diksha Bhumi, right?
Yes.
Very popular stupa and believed to be the largest or the second largest Buddhist stupa in Asia, and very significant in terms of Ambedkar accepting Buddhism at this place, right? Amol, I think that's why it's very popular as well. Yeah, Nagpur does have a significant Buddhist population too, right? So that's one of the reasons, I believe. And apart from that, there's a few other Vadas too. Chitnavis Vada being a popular one, apart from the Baka Baicha Vada that we visited. So a lot of things you can visit, and obviously even from a food perspective, we did touch upon the popular Tari Poha, but beyond that, the Savji cuisine, right? I think that's how it's pronounced.
Yes.
Am I pronouncing it correctly? It's very popular to this area, to Nagpur and the Vidarbha region in general, right?
Yes.
The very spicy cuisine that's prevalent in this region.
Yeah. With the industrialization, there came up these textile mills at Nagpur. So one of them being Tata's Empress Mill, which came up. And eventually, handloom weavers, they were unemployed. So they started their eateries, and they started selling their food. So Sauji is the community which is also known as Koshtis. So it is the food of that community which they sell.
Right.
So it's very, very spicy. Most of it is non-vegetarian delicacy, but there are vegetarian options as well.
Yeah, so definitely try that out, but beware that it's going to be very, very spicy, like Amol mentioned. But yeah, thanks so much, Amol, for so beautifully covering off so many important parts of Nagpur, and more importantly, like I mentioned, giving us a sense of the literally the evolution of Nagpur, right? We really, really look forward to following Orange Odyssey, and would like to congratulate you once again for your third anniversary celebrations. And hopefully, as a part of our collaboration, we could also give away a few tickets to these wonderful walks done by Orange Odyssey to some of your participants. We'll definitely plan that out and let our listeners know how they can try to participate as well. Yeah, next time, before even you think of Nagpur mein kya hai, think about what Amol said. Nagpur mein bahut hai, aur ये सब कुछ है जो we discussed over the past 60 minutes or so. Thanks so much, Amol.
Yeah, thank you so much, Seth. So next time when you make a visit to any of the tiger reserves, do take an extra day and stop at Nagpur. So Nagpur is also known as the tiger capital of India or tiger capital of the world, as it connects the 13 tiger reserves in the nearby area.
Definitely an icing on the cake by adding the several tiger reserves in the vicinity too. And thank you so much, Amol, once again for covering off so much and showing us a glimpse of what Nagpur is all about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seth.
That was yet another great episode on the Musafir Stories. Make sure to show us some love by sharing the podcast with your friends and family. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Musafir Stories. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM podcast app or the website. Follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.